Hello everyone. In this video we're going to be talking about level believability. So at the most basic, what does that mean? It means when you're making a level for a game, you want it to be believable. And keep in mind, we're not saying realistic, we're saying believable. So let's talk about this for a second. If you're using the word realistic, what exactly does that mean? Right? Well, if you're making a level that's in the future, it's in the year 3025. Of course, if we're in that time, it's going to be realistic because we're living it. But in a video game, how can we make that realistic when we have no clue what's going to happen in the year 3025? So what we have to do is make it believable. When a player is in that level that you created in that time period, everything there needs to be believable, not by you, but by the person who plays it. So it's our job as a level designer is to make that level believable to the player. So another example of not using realistic, if you're making a toon-shaded or cartoony type of level, obviously that is not realistic. But the player needs to believe that they are in this area, and it needs to make sense. So what we're going to do today in this video is we're going to show an example of a forest. So for anyone that's making a forest level, it's a good example, but the information in this video pertains to any level that you create. You just have to adapt the knowledge for your level. So the first thing you need to do in order to make something believable is to research it. You need to find out as much as you can about it. And luckily, in this day and age, we have the internet, which is a gigantic database and library of resources for us to create. So what we're going to do is we're going to be taking a look at images of forests, since that's what we're going to be creating. So in this first image here, you'll notice that we are looking at the forest canopy, or the treetops of this forest. And you might be asking yourself, why are we looking at this video or at this image? And the main reason is, look at all the colors. When most people think of forests, they just think, okay, trees, bushes, grass, green. Everything is green. But if you've ever actually stopped and taken a look at all the different colors and plants and life that's in a forest, you'll notice that there's not just green. So in this picture alone, there's a couple yellow, there's light green, bright green, dark green. There's even different types of trees and different types of leaves. So a little bit of staring at this picture will make you realize that you need, in order to make a forest, different colors of textures and materials, different types of trees and bushes, different scales, because some of these trees are higher than the others, and different rotations, because all the different trees are facing a different way. So let's take a look at this next picture. In this picture, not only do we have different shades of green and different types of trees, we also have brown. You'll notice there's one random brown tree on the side of this mountain that's really making you focus on it. So something like that is great in a level if you want to draw the player's eyes to that spot, or if you want to lead the player through a level. So that one brown tree in this example is pretty cool. So now let's go down below to the actual path in the forest that we're going to make. Now again, we're going to talk about believability in a level versus realism. So in this path, if you look to the bottom right of the picture, you'll see that there's a lot of twigs and bushes and roots and rocks. So if you were to add every single one of those into a 3D level, you might crash your computer, because every polygon, every texture, every material on all these objects takes up precious computer processing power, takes up resources, and inevitably it creates lag, which every gamer has come through. So what we have to do is find a way to make this believable enough that the player thinks those things are there, while still maintaining a good frames per second in the level. Normally we can do that with texturing, but there's also other things you have to think about while you go through that. Now let's take a look at another picture here. In this example, again, it's on the forest floor, on the path. You have all of these leaves. Now when it's your first time making a level, you're probably going to add every single one of those as an independent 3D model. But you don't need to do that. All you really need to do is have a texture with a little bit of transparency on it, so you can see more leaves along the edges and less leaves in the middle. In this example here, we have a rock, and a rock has moss on it. At the same time, we have a smaller rock down below and a bunch of rocks to the left. And all of these items are overlapping each other and growing on top of each other, and the moss is going into the crevices and the cracks, and there's sticks and all these things. So while this is very realistic and something you would see in nature if you were in the forest, it's not something that we could really put inside of a game just the way you see it. You have to find a way to find that perfect balance of models, texturing, lighting, shadows, and processing power on your computer. With a good combination of all of those, you can make a level that's not only believable, but fun to play as well, but could also lead the player through a certain path, could be fun to play, and overall just be a good level. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at an actual example here. In this level, we are first looking at, we're going to look at 4 different chunks, 4 different little pieces of a forest. And in this first one here, you will notice that this is your basic, whoever makes a level, it's their first level ever. They've taken a bunch of trees and a bunch of plants and they've just copy-pasted a bunch of times and they've filled up this area of the forest. And, you know, us as the players, we might see a path, but not necessarily see a path. It looks like there may be an attempt at a path, but we're just not quite sure where to go in this area. Do we go between the trees on the left, between the trees on the right? Do we go up the middle? You know, are we really in a forest that was man-made? Or are we in a forest that is natural made out in the woods? Or are we in some kind of, you know, I don't know, some kind of environment where these trees are made dynamically by a computer? We really don't know, right? It's too mathematical, it's too lined up perfectly to really feel believable like a forest. So what we would do is, once we have this level built, and we have all the gameplay doing what it needs to do, we can now go in and make it better. We can do iterations. We can save this file and open it up and start improving it as another file. So this would be version 1. Version 2, you would come over here and you would think about it and you'd say, okay, well, what can I actually do to improve what I had? Well, to make trees more believable, what can you do? You can scale them, you can rotate them, and you can move them so they're not perfectly aligned. The same thing goes for bushes. Scale, rotate, and move. And why is that? That's because in a forest, every single tree grows completely different, just like every human on the planet. Some are taller, some are shorter, some are fatter, some are skinnier, some are darker, some are lighter, some are healthy, some are sick. We're all different, okay? The forest is the same way. Now at the same time, when all these trees and plants and flowers and things grow, they drop seeds on the ground. And based on the way the ground is shaped, if it's on the side of a mountain, those seeds are going to roll down to the bottom of the mountain and you're going to get more of those plants and trees and flowers at the bottom. Some trees only grow in high altitudes, some only grow in low altitudes. There's all these things you have to think about just to make a forest. Now you can also see that this path here is also becoming a little bit more defined by the shadows and the lighting and the way the plants are laid out, with the bigger plant in the back to maybe lead the player to it. So again, what can you do for version 3? Well, let's take a look. Let's zoom out a little bit here. You'll notice that in version 3, we still have the things being scaled and rotated and moved around, but what also have we done? Well, we realized that based on our reference images, we cannot have one tree in our forest or one bush. We have to have multiple. So in this example, we've added in different bushes and different trees. And you'll notice as we rotate, there's a couple of them scattered throughout the level. We also made sure that we were still focusing on our path so the player would know exactly where to go. And we remembered that we want that brown tree to be noticeable. We want something in the level to draw the player's eye, to lead the player towards it. So we added in this big rock. This big rock here, it's making the player focus on it while they're walking through the level. Okay? Now, something to keep in mind is if you have the rock floating slightly above the ground, that's not believable. You've never seen a rock float. Okay? Or if the rock is rotated in some weird angle like this and then shoved into the ground, that doesn't really make sense, right? Rocks don't do that, okay? So, there is something else to think about when it comes to this rock though. how did the rock get here? Why is it sitting on the ground like that? Why is it shaped like that? Why does it look like that? What is the story? Did this rock come from a meteor and crash into the ground? Did someone put it there like Stonehenge? Did it fall off a larger rock? Why exactly is it there? And that's something the player is going to wonder. They're going to see that rock and say, wait a minute, that doesn't feel right. They might not understand why it doesn't feel right, but they're going to think it in the back of their mind, and maybe one day they'll come to the conclusion that, hey, that rock was kind of weird. So, what can you do to further improve it? And again, you'll notice that with every iteration of this, the forest is becoming more and more believable. So the first forest, again, is your first level ever you've ever created, or it's just a prototype level, or you're just copy pasting to get it done to meet your deadline. But after that, you want to go in, scale, rotate, and move everything. Because if it's in a forest, it's not man-made. It's not a garden of trees, right? Everything's going to have its own place, but for a specific reason. Then you're going to want to help define that path, add in more colors, add in more flavor, whether it's more bushes of different types, different trees, whatever it may be, different rocks, things like that. Now keep in mind, we're not talking about adding more polygons, right? We're only adding in what you need. So again, in the first example, we had X number of trees, right? We have the same number of trees and same number of bushes in this example, number 3. We only added in the extra rock, so it's only a couple extra polygons. The rock should have technically been in the first one as well if the level designer had everything they knew at one time. Maybe for some reason an artist didn't have the rock finished for whatever reason until, the third version. But the trees and bushes are all the same number. So in this last example, number 4, the 4th iteration of your level, you've got everything, right? Different scale, different rotations, different colors, different shades of plants, different types of plants. You might have had an extra rock added in, whatever it may be. But you've also defined that path a lot more. And you've made that terrain more realistic because you know that terrain is not perfectly flat. No matter what you do, it's never flat if you're in a forest because humans have not flattened it out. They've not put a road on it, for example. You also know that when there is a path, the color is going to be different. The plants are going to be flat. They're going to be squished because people have walked on them. And it's not going to be perfectly straight. There's going to be this little edge here on both sides. Okay? And the shadows are going to help define that even more. But look what else we've added. In the distance here, over by this rock, because we want the player to focus on the left, to look to the left as they're walking through. Maybe there's an item to collect, maybe there's an enemy, whatever it may be. So we've added a slight hint of a green light in this area. Not only because green means good, but because green means go, right? Most people on the planet have realized that green means go, green means good. Right? It also means there's something glowing in a video game. And what does that mean in a video game? Glowing means go get it, go interact with it, go touch it, go fight it, go shoot it, go do something, notice it. Now, why green? Well, if we're in a forest, everything has different shades of green anyway. So a brighter green makes sense, whereas something glowing blue might not make sense in our level. But it all depends on what we're doing. It all depends on the believability. Now again, talking about realism, you'll notice that this does look believable. It might not be real, but that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to make an area for a video game that plays very smooth, it's very fun, and it's believable. So the player walking through that path sees what they need to see, does what they need to do, and believes that they're in this forest. It doesn't have to be real, it just has to be believable. So, this video again, we're talking about how to take your level that you've created and make it more believable for the player. And in these examples, we've gone over how to scale, rotate, and move these items in a way that is believable. Making reference images give us more detail, so doing actual research on the actual thing that we're trying to make, and getting as much data as possible from those images and those reference materials in order to help us make a better, more believable level.